Hey everyone. Thanks, Hunter. That was an awesome intro.
That was so lovely. Thank you, Hunter. You are amazing.
Oh, I accept it and receive it, which I'm working on that. So thank you. Y'all are amazing and great. I am so excited to sit back and enjoy this chat. I'm here if you need me in the background if anything comes up, okay?
Awesome. Thank you so much. Hi everyone.
Hey, good morning. Well, I don't know if there's anybody on the West Coast or anywhere else, but good morning. We're afternoon now on the East Coast. First of all, Ashley, you and I have worked together since January, early February of this year, and needless to say, it wouldn't be possible without you. For those who don't know, Ashley and I are both at Morgan Stanley right now. We're both in very similar roles. Ashley supports our tech and innovation division, which she's doing an amazing job at. And as you heard, I am overseeing our US Banks division, which is a part of our company infrastructure team. But enough about me. Let's dive into Ashley. So Ashley, you just came back from an amazing vacation. You were out in sunny California. You went to Disneyland. You were there for their Pride events this week. I mean, over the week, last week. Not to mention yesterday was Juneteenth. Not to mention it was Father's Day. And you're back in New York, seated, looking. How you feeling?
I'm feeling good, refreshed. I don't know that I've ever given an answer of good and refreshed during Pride Month before. So that is a nice change. But yeah, I've never taken time off in June. Certainly not, in the last 10 years or so. So it was really nice to have some time to get to celebrate, marched in LA Pride, as you mentioned, celebrated with some old colleagues at Disney where I was for 12 years previously. And so getting to see them do their first official Pride event in a US park was super special. So it was nice to be out in LA and in Anaheim, getting to share with some of that chosen family of mine, and now to be home to get to do that in New York is really a treat. So yeah, happy to be here. This is so fun getting to engage with this community. As mentioned, we'll take questions. We can't see your comments in the chat, but feel free to engage with one another. We're happy that you're able to do that and chat with each other.
Of course. All right, so let's just dive right in, because I know we don't have a lot of time, and I want to give our viewers, something to chomp on. So let's talk about career first and foremost. So it seems like, a constant right now is there's constant change everywhere, across every industry over the past few years. First, there was a great resignation in 2021 and the war for talent. And now we're seeing the opposite with reductions in force and layoffs here, hitting every single company, So, whether you have to make change or pivot to something new recently, I think it's safe to say that we can all relate. We see your struggles and we see your identities during this time of change. But actually, as someone who just made a major career shift, can you share a little bit about your journey up until this point? Where did you start and how did you get here?
Absolutely. I'm happy to, and I'm excited for you to get to share that with everyone as well. Even hearing Hunter, right, recently make a change during the intro. So I think it's something, first of all, that I don't know that I expected to be in this period of change in my life. It's been really beautiful. And for me, it was a choice, which I know, given the state of the economy and really every industry right now, there's so much change, whether it's by choice or by force, everybody seems to be making these really big changes and shifts. And so I think when we were thinking about what we were going to talk about, it's Pride Month, there's so much we can dive into, whether it's celebration or the struggles of the community, all of these different things that are going on. But I think something that's super relevant is, what does it look like to make these changes, make these shifts, and still show up really as yourself? So for me, I came to Disney years ago through an acquisition. I had been in tech for a long time, part of Major League Baseball, which became BAMTech and then was acquired by Disney. So that was a season of change, right? That was not by my choice, but was really, really interesting. I was the only in a lot of ways, which I think is something that many of us, especially within the queer community, can relate to, is having that feeling of being the only in various aspects of your identity. And so I was often the only woman, which I think in tech is not really uncommon, right? And so being a woman leader, being a queer leader, being a Jewish leader, there were all of these different parts of my identity that I always felt were kind of pulling me away from the work that was at hand, because we weren't doing a ton to kind of service the full people that were there doing the work, right? Especially when you're working in innovation, so focused on releases and innovating and change and launches that you don't often get to take that time to take that stock of what your people really need. And so I came into D&I work first a little bit by necessity, passion. It was kind of the perfect union of those things. And so while I was doing my tech work, I started a lot of our employee resource groups over at what is now Disney Streaming. Ended up having the opportunity years ago to make this shift, right, from working in technology to working with technologists. And so that was a really big opportunity for me to shift my career and make, at the time, what felt like my gay job into my day job, which I loved, and really getting to engage across all different communities, right? Ones that I was a part of, one that I was working to be an ally to, and make sure that I was really able to center that human experience. And it resonated. So the work was amazing. I loved what I was doing. But I think, it's human nature to look for what's next and what's different. And when you feel like you're doing really good work, thinking about how you could take that work and lift it and go somewhere else where you can make a bigger impact, but also where you can expand your opportunity for learning. And so that's really what it was for me. I think last year with all of the legislative changes across the country, especially being at Disney, there was a big focus on everything obviously going on in Florida, don't say gay and all of that. I think it really just caused me to kind of take stock in what I wanted to do. And so it became the perfect timing for me to think about what was next. And when I started having conversations with Morgan Stanley and seeing that it was a place where I could come and do some really great work, but also be supported for who I am, that was kind of the impetus for me. And getting there and seeing not only was I coming in new in this major leadership role, but to have you join just a few weeks before me and to see how much our D&I org at Morgan Stanley has been growing with people from really diverse lived experiences and careers and industries has been super rewarding.
Oh, of course. I mean, I think that's super important. And just, I know you kind of mentioned me, but I really on this conversation for you. You mentioned coming to Morgan Stanley because they were an organization that you deemed fit to represent and to support you with whatever identity you chose to, become. So can you tell me a little bit more for the audience at home? What does that look like? Because I know a lot of people are starting their careers out, and right now we're in such an era of constant shift and change in terms of how we're identifying. It can be difficult to think about or even to demand or ask questions about how a company supports someone who has a non-standard identity in this country. What were some of the questions that you asked, or what was the conversation like? How did you deem Morgan Stanley as the right place based on the answers that you got to your questions?
I love this question. I think it's really important. I think for me, obviously coming in at a more senior level, it was a level of privilege, right? Where I was getting to interview the company just as much as they were interviewing me. But I think some of the best advice I can offer, especially having been in a talent acquisition space for a really long time in my career, is we're all doing that, right? I think there's obviously times in life, career, different circumstances where you really need the job, right? And so I think I don't want to kind of minimize that necessity, right? We live in a capitalistic society. We have to have jobs to live. But it's exactly that, right? We don't live to work. And so I think for me, having that opportunity where I really was looking to make a change that was the right change for me long term was making sure that if I introduce myself with my pronouns, which I do nearly everywhere, every room that I walk into, I try to or zoom into, that I wasn't going to get weird looks or I wasn't going to be treated differently. If I referenced my partner in day-to-day conversation with colleagues, right, as many of us do, that the word partner wouldn't set off triggers, right, that the pronouns that I used wouldn't make people think about me differently or treat me differently. And then there's the things that are really important in our day-to-day life, benefits, healthcare, all of these things when we think about community give back, right? I've been really involved in a lot of nonprofits, especially supporting the queer community for a long time. And so those were the things. What does your benefits look like? What is the family planning benefits? Gender affirming care? What are all of these different things? And both what do we offer, but also how comfortable are the people that you're talking to in speaking about it? And then the final thing was asking about employee resource groups at Morgan Stanley, their employee networks. And it was something that in my interview process, I was really aware of. And obviously in a D&I role, it's part of the work, but I think that's something that anybody can ask for, right? What are your internal communities look like? Where can I find people in addition to my day job? Where can I find my people to make that connection and really create community within space?
No, of course. And I'm so grateful for that answer. And I'm sure a lot of other folks will be in the same light. I think that it's so important, like you said, to have that confidence and to
Yeah.
have that wherewithal to know that if a company is interviewing you and you've gotten to first round, second round, third rounds, they're actively as interested in you as you might potentially be in them. And if you take the opportunity to really ask those difficult yet personal questions, I think it can honestly, it might be one of the reasons why they might end up hiring you, because you can show you are definitely interested in what kind of working environment that you are going into. So I definitely want to perpetuate this idea that it's safe to ask certain questions about your own.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing on that is, right, you always hear, do your homework, right? Know about the company. That is good advice. I think one of the things when it comes to diversity and inclusion at any company is that if they're putting things out there on the internet, at least in my experience, that is just kind of the tip of the iceberg, right? Things that companies are putting out there to see publicly are the things they're the most proud of, that are making the most impact. And I think for me to see how much Morgan Stanley had out there across communities that they were doing, I knew there was more, right? There's always more when you come internal. There's always more when you get to work with the employee resource groups. And so to see the vast kind of landscape of how much work was happening that they were so proud to share publicly, I couldn't wait to kind of get to dig more once I was internal.
And that's so good to hear. I'm glad that the answers were exactly what you needed them to be.
Yeah.
So we talked a bit about getting into a specific company and what your experience was, but let's talk about what happens when you're there, right? Let's talk about that day to day. So in D&I spaces, especially, and even with companies nowadays, the constant phrase is showing up as your whole authentic self, right? And I use the air quotes comedically because that's how, you hear it in your head. But for you specifically, what does that look like for you? Are there any noticeable differences? And of course, the answer is yes, but let's talk about the science of how. Are there any noticeable differences between who you are at home and who you are at work? And what thought process is behind that?
Yeah, I think for me, it's been an iterative process right throughout my career. I think it's both kind of been the evolution of, my confidence, both in myself and my identity and just being comfortable with who I am. I think that's something that has come a lot with experience over time and privilege, right? Like, as we talked about earlier, I think there's a bit of that for me. I found really who I am, my identity. I came out at work, right? Because I had found my people at Disney, and I found both the psychological safety and the language that really kind of came together with this beautiful community to give me that space to come out and live, really authentically at work. However, to your point, there is a difference there. And so I think as I've gotten more comfortable, I do show up more and more myself. I am someone who is pretty outspoken. I try to be as transparent as I can be. I think it's really important. But there's a difference, of course. I think people that know me super well, I think we'll see a little bit of a difference. I try, of course, to be a bit more polished. We work in a super corporate environment. And so I think that there is a level, certainly, in this new role, right? I'm in a new space. I'm meeting new people. I'm really establishing that for myself. And I think I feel it a little bit more now that I'm kind of stepping into something new. I think the big noticeable difference to be, fully authentic, I curse a lot when I'm home. I try not to work. That's probably the biggest. But honestly, beyond that, I'm a fighter, right? And I think that is something that colleagues, my teammates, my, directs when I've led teams, like, I think those are the things that are really noticeable. But I think when it comes to work, I try to be really deliberate in thinking about what is the fight and what is the result that I'm looking for, because not every fight is one worth fighting, which is something I've learned throughout the course of my career. Probably didn't know as much earlier on, but to see, what are the things worth pushing and where are the things where, it really isn't worth the energy or the struggle, right? Because you really do want to bring people along. I think the quote that really kind of leads all of the work that I've ever done in the D&I space is really one by Ruth Bader Ginsburg, which is all about making sure that you're fighting for the things that you care about, but doing it in a way that invites others to join you, right? So what good is it to be, putting up this fight if you don't have others kind of on the battlefield with you? And so I think those have been the things for me that are the noticeable differences, figuring out really what are the things that I want to push to make meaningful change. That probably in my personal life, I would just go for all of it.
Not a great answer. So looking at where you came from Disney. Disney has been in the press a lot the past year. Looking where I came from at Condé Nast, who's also been in the press, the past couple of years. Looking at both of those industries and how they're so separate from where we are right now, coming into an industry that has also been in the press quite a bit over the course of the millennia that it's been around. It can be a bit daunting to go from one industry that is relatively creative and what some would consider more flashy or more, centered around lifestyle experiences versus one that is rooted in institutionalism and in classicism and things that just are not necessarily universally understood by one particular group, right? This is finance, this is money, this is old money, this is American money, this is, a very conservative industry. And, I'll speak for myself, and I'm pretty sure that you can agree with this. It's been a shift to come into a culture and an environment that wasn't necessarily designed with us in mind, right?
Yeah.
So when we talk about identity and showing up, especially being, having as much intersectionality as you and I both do, you're queer, you're a woman, you identify with so many other identities that don't even fall on the spectrum, as do I, like neurodivergence, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So how do you manage those decisions in the moment, day to day, year over year, month over month, about how you show up, and what things do you reveal about yourself? How do you still become a leader? How do you manage that when you're still the newbie on the street? How do you demand that presence of saying, hey, I have tenure, I've worked hard, I've done my homework, I know my business, but also, guys, I'm still learning, I'm a team player, I'm here to show up. Share some light on that for me.
Absolutely. Well, I think when you think about industries, thinking about both Disney, Condé, right? When you think about entertainment and media and that space, I think for the most part, overall, companies that are in those spheres are very far progressed when you think about diversity and inclusion, right? And so that was for me at the time, especially starting my career in that space, a really exciting place to get to grow and learn and be challenged and be doing things that are so far on the forefront in this industry. And I think that was both the beauty of it and the learning of it, but it was also the curse, right? Because you get to this point where we're doing these amazing things, putting out these incredible films and TV specials and building things in these parks that are just like so accessible and so inclusive and so representative, that the things that are blockers can be so frustrating, right? And so I think I'm also a big fan, right? Mickey Mouse is sitting right next to me. So I think for me, it was like, if I'm going to make a change, I want to go somewhere where I can really make an impact. Right? I don't do this work for me. There's probably easier, less emotional, less personal work that I could go do that would be much easier to take that hat off at the end of the day and get to relax. And so I think with D&I work, and really as an industry, anybody who's in this space, whether it's your full-time job, whether you're leading an employee resource group, employee network, we're tired, right? It's exhausting. There's things happening in this space. It feels like every minute. We're constantly reacting to tragedy and social unrest and injustice. And so for me, if I was going to make a change like that, right, I had been through those series of companies, but I had been in that space my whole career. So if I was going to make a change, I really wanted to come somewhere where they were dedicated to the change, but also could benefit from what I had done and what I had learned and what I had experienced. And so for me, it was, the way we talked about in the interview process, I really was kind of figuring out, is this somewhere where I can show up as myself, where I can find those communities, but also can I bring some things? Are they looking for that change? And I think that was the thing that I was the most excited about, right? This firm has been around for over 80 years. And for the first time, they changed their values over the pandemic to add commitment to diversity and inclusion. And it's not just words, though it is so nice to see those words in our headquarters, above the check-in desk, everywhere we go, next to all of those other values that we have: do the right thing, give back, commit to diversity and inclusion. It's everywhere. And I think that in itself was a huge shift for the firm. And it's been really nice to see, as we talked about, people coming in to the D&I space, but really across the firm in all different roles. We're super passionate about this work. And so I think it's about what rooms you go into. I try not to code switch for myself and make spaces where other people feel that they need to too, right? I really want them to be able to show up safely and fully, however that looks for them. But, I think it's different, right? In a space with mostly LGBTQIA plus people, I lean more into using they, them pronouns. I say queer a lot more, right? When I'm in more heteronormative spaces, I'm using the acronym. It feels more comfortable. I'm totally fine with she, her pronouns. That's why I use mixed, right? Like, and those are personal for me. That's not how it's going to be for every person, for everyone living in a gender expansive space. But I think those are some of the little things that I do. But the things that I don't change, right, are, you see my pronouns on the screen. They're in every Zoom meeting. I actually wear a pin today. I put on a rainbow for y'all too, because Pride Month. But like, I wear a pin with my pronouns every day since my first day at this job, right? There's little things that you can do that kind of establish who you are. I think it also makes it safe for people that I'm meeting to say, I'm here, I'm safe, I'm someone you can come to.
Well said. And just to confirm, she does wear the pins every single day, and it makes me feel safe. It makes a lot of our workers feel safe. And like you said, it just spreads the message that it's okay to be you, whatever you looks like. So let's talk about, before we wrap up, let's talk about allyship for a quick second. I think that we talk about advocates and employee resource groups so much, and a lot of other companies have them. They're great resources, at the Gambit. But I want to just ask you, someone who identifies as a leader, someone who has the voice of reason, the voice of change, the change the tide. For allies on the call, or for people who are talking to allies actively, what are some things that we could recommend now that we are in year 4 of since social unrest, and using the word so much? Now that we're in year 4, what are some things that we can still advise to our allies to be better allies to us and to continue to make us feel safe?
Absolutely. The first thing you should pretty much hear anybody say when they answer this question is to show up, right? So like, join those groups at any company I have been a part of, and most that I'm aware of, employee resource groups are open to everyone. That's the bedrock of them, right? So of course, join the ones that you identify with, but join all of them. It was I think I did it on my first day at Morgan Stanley. How do I join every single employee network? I want to know what's going on. I want to show up for their events. I want to honor their heritage months, their observance dates or holidays, whatever those things are. I want to be there. I think it's the easiest, but I also think it's like level 0 of allyship, right? It's like, just be there. I think the other things that are really important that people probably discount sometimes is doing some of your own education, right? Do the work yourself. We heard a lot about this in 2020. And I think now that we're kind of on this like lull post social unrest a bit, it feels like everyone's kind of in this like hangover from all the work they've done in 2020. And so I think those things that everyone seemed to understand after George Floyd was murdered, of do the work, don't put the labor on members of these communities, right? Read a book, watch a TV special. There's so much more that's out there right now that doing a little bit of work to educate yourself, documentary, whatever, like do some of that work yourself. But I think that the thing that gets lost, and that I remind people a lot in my work, is it's okay to ask, right? You have D&I leaders at your companies. We're the ones who are there to ask those questions. You have questions about LGBTQIA plus stuff in the workplace. Literally, that's why I'm here. So let's have a conversation, as long as your intention is good in that specific instance, right? I think overall the impact is more important, but I think when you're trying to learn, especially when it comes to allyship, ask questions, find out who those people are where you can ask those uncomfortable questions, ask them, and ask them multiple times, right? I think, I use the example of my parents all the time. My mom loves to like be the number one ally. Both of my parents do. My dad doesn't get it. And that's okay. And so we stop and we have conversations all the time about all different things, because he wants to be along for the journey. And I think we tend, or I see often people get more defensive because it's like, you should know this, or you should be there. And I think one of the most important things that we can do is just have a little compassion, and give a little bit of space for that learning.
Perfectly said, Ashley. And there's so much that we can continue to talk about, but I know that we're getting close to time, and I want to give anyone or in our audience that may have any questions or any comments or things they want to share a chance to do that. So I'm not sure, since we don't have a chat function, how that might operate, but if there's anyone on the call who wants to jump in, please do so. You have us for the next few minutes.
Yeah, or I don't know if they can come through the Q&A section. Oh, there's Hunter. Hi, friend.
Hello. Yes, so you have a couple of questions, so let's jump in while we got it. So we had a question. First off, I just want to say you got some love in the chat too. These are great tips, Ashley. So people said that as well. Okay, are there any specific initiatives or policies you would like to see implemented in workplaces to better support LGBTQIA plus professionals?
So many, we don't have enough time to go through the things that I think needs to be.
In 1 minute, Ashley, tell us everything we need to fix, please.
I think the things that we need to fix are the things that are obvious, and it seems like companies are getting there, but it's like everyone's on a varying degree, right? So I think some of the things I talked about in the interview process of what are the benefits, right? Making sure that people can have families, plan families, get the healthcare that they need, especially right now. I think something that really was important to me to see at Morgan Stanley was support for travel, right? If there's restrictions on healthcare in your state, to have support to travel places where it is legal and safe to get the healthcare that you need. I think things like, having the ability to share your pronouns and doing that, especially in heteronormative spaces, I think helps a lot. I think those are the things on the day to day. And then also spaces that just make it possible to do work, right? Gender inclusive restrooms, or just the fact that we have rooms that have toilets in them. Who cares gender on that? Things like that, I think, are the things that day to day, regardless of industry or workplace, that can really just make work safer and less daunting to enter a new space.
Yeah. And in this last minute, is there any advice you would give to folks who are considering a career pivot, but are maybe hesitant about the potential challenges or risks involved?
Yeah, I think first of all, we all are. I think everyone is. It's a scary, scary thing. So I think sitting with that, knowing that you're not alone, helps. Reach out to people, right? Charles and I are both on LinkedIn. I'm sure everyone speaking today is. Reach out to one another. I spoke to 1 million people in my interview process, and I was still reaching out to people on LinkedIn at Morgan Stanley to be like, I saw you're involved in Pride. Can you tell me about your experience as a queer person, right? So like, do that. People are much more willing and open than I think I expected. And so really lean on your network. I think it's one of the most important things you can do these days.
Awesome. Well, Ashley and Charles, thank you so much for making the time today. You said you're both on LinkedIn. Is that the best way for folks to reach out and keep the conversation going?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. I hope your dogs are well, Ashley.
They behaved. I was shocked.
I know mine's passed out on what I like to call his bed, which is also the one I sleep in.
that I resonate with a lot. Thank you so much for having us.
Have a great day. Please come back. This was great. Come on back now. You hear?
We will. Happy Pride.
Happy
Great.
Pride.
Happy Pride, y'all.